Welcome to Shaped by Faith. We shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. Okay, Brent is my very special guest. I've been trying to get you on my show for a long time.
4 years.
Probably longer. Yes. Okay. So I'm glad you're on my show, Brent. You're my special guest.
Thank you.
Yes. Brent Gardner. He has been in the radio business how long?
It will be 37 years in October.
Wow.
Off and on. I've had other careers in that time, but they always draw me back in, Theresa.
Well, you love radio. You're good at radio.
Absolutely.
He edits my show. You're also the aren't you
production director?
Yeah, I'm going production director.
I'm production director
here
for WOMI WBKR.
Okay, and we're going to get into that because I want to know exactly what that involves. So
I don't even know.
Yes, you do. You do everything. So you've been in the business about 37 years.
Yes.
That's about how long I've been in the fitness industry. Okay. So did you always have a desire to be on the air, or what led you to radio?
Ever since I was a kid. I grew up in Los Angeles.
Okay.
When I was a kid. And they had this great AM station out there. It was KHJ. And if you ever see the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's the background for the show, for that movie. It's KHJ AM. And it was the real Don Steele and Robert W. Morgan. And I grew up listening to these guys all the time we lived in California. We were out there like 11 or 12 years. And I listened to these guys, and I'm thinking, I would love to do that because it was Boss Radio. You ever heard of Boss Radio?
I think I have, yes.
I mean, it was quick. It was quick, and it was fantastic to listen to it. And that's when I grew up. And it was a mixture of everything. It was top 40. It was country. It was everything there was. And they would mix it all down, and it was amazing. And that's how I fell in love with radio.
So you loved all the different genres of music.
Everything.
Because some people just like a certain genre.
I mean, they would take Glenn Campbell and mix him down with the Beatles.
Wow.
Or anybody. The rock. It was rock and country and pop all mixed together. And I absolutely loved it. And it was Boss Radio, and it was quick. And they just kept going and going. And it was just boom, 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 and I absolutely loved it.
Okay, so how did you get into the radio business?
Okay, well, when I was a kid, we moved back here to Owensboro. I was in love with the radio, and we had WOMI. It was WOMI and another one. I can't mention it. But they were the two AM stations in town. And they were the River City Rockers because, we had BKR. It started in 1972, and then we had another one. It was FM station, but it was another format. It wasn't top 40 at the time. So all the kids, when I was growing up, we listened to VJS or WOMI, and man, I wanted to get on either one of them. But I zeroed in on OMI. I actually wrote letters to the station trying to get on, and I guess
Did you really?
Yeah, they just threw them in the trash. So it came around. My friend of mine, it always happens. I have my sister's friend got a job at WOMI. And she called me up one day, and this is like 83, I guess it's like September 83. And I was in my early 20s. And that's kind of old for people to get in radio in your early 20s.
Why?
Because most of the people I ever met in radio started when they were teenagers. By the time they were 22 years old, they'd been around a long time. They were veterans. But I got started, and she called me up, and she said, hey, you need a job. Would you like a part-time job? And I said, absolutely. I said, where at? And she said, WOMI WBKR. And I said, you're kidding me.
Your dream job.
And I said, absolutely. And so I started as an operator.
Okay, so what did you do as an operator?
I would come in, and we had BKR was fully automated except for the morning show with Big Bill Love.
I remember him.
That was the only live show on at the time on BKR when I was there. And the rest of the day was all on an automation system that we had at the time, and it was called Bertha. We had an automation system called Bertha, and what it was 4 reel-to-reel machines and things that look like 8-tracks are called carts, and it all ran off of that. It wasn't like digital or anything we've got today. It was all reel-to-reel and ran off carts.
Sort of like the first computer.
It was kind of like that, yeah. I guess you could think of it that way, but she was huge. I mean, she was like the size of a car, and I would go in every night and program that. And then it would take me a couple hours because I'd have to hook all the carts in and slide them on trays. And then after I got finished with that, I'd run over to OMI, and we had a show on there called TalkNet. It was hosted by Bruce Williams and Sally Jesse Raphael. And I ran that the rest of the night till 5 o'clock. And then from 5 to 6 o'clock, I did the show. It was like a middle-of-the-road kind of popish music back then when I started. And I would do an hour show, and then our morning guy would come in.
So that's it. You just got thrown into the business.
It was crazy. It was crazy. Oh, yeah. I only had barely 2 weeks, and then I was turned loose. Here you go. Start doing it.
Did it make you nervous at all?
A little bit. because I had never done it before, and then I started getting into it, and that's when I just absolutely fell in love with it. I've always loved it, but being in it's a whole different thing.
So radio's changed a lot, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole different ball game now.
Is it more challenging or less challenging or just different?
It's just different because it's more automated. Today, back when I started, and I actually spun records, the old records.
Can you explain that?
Like 45s that you'd have to put them on a record player, and you'd have to actually cue them up and everything and play. And when I started, really got on the air, there was none of this automated stuff where today you can voice track. But back then, you had to be in the room because the record could run out. You had to play all the spots one at a time. And what we had, cart machines. And, you had to plan everything. Today, you can voice track. You can go get a hamburger. You can do whatever you want because you can throw your tracks in. You got all the time. It was a different world. Yeah.
And that's when groups really came in live in the stations, didn't they? Like different record groups, different musicians that were wanting their voice heard.
Yeah, they would come in. Some they still do today. We still have some come in today. It's not as much as it used to be, but they would bring the records in, try to get on the air. And the final segment today, I got the greatest radio story. We'll just tease people about that so they'll hang around. You don't want to listen to me. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you're great listening. Yeah, I
we've
love
got the greatest radio story coming up in the third segment of the show.
I can't wait for them to hear it.
It's my favorite story to tell.
Okay, let's talk about your first remote and explain what that is and what you had to do.
A remote is when we go out to a client's location, a business, and we broadcast live, and usually do like 3 breaks an hour. So usually a remote today is like 2 hours long. It can be 3, but it's 2 hours. They get 6 breaks. And so you go out and you're live on location at your client's place, and you have to send back. When I started, we did it on a thing called a Marty. It was a mini receiver, and we would have to shoot it back to the tower, and then it would send it to the station. So it was live. Today, it's a whole different ballgame than it used to be. But we'd go out and do it live. My first remote was this was in the 90s. I worked at a top 40 station, and they sent me, my first remote was in Evansville. And I don't know if a lot of people probably remember it. We had a thing called a boombox, and we would haul that boombox around. Well, my first remote, and I'd never dragged the boombox before, so that was a whole
talking about a real big boombox,
giant. Oh, it was big. And if anybody remembers what I'm talking about, it was big. It had 2 big speakers on either end. They were like 6 feet tall or bigger, and in the middle was a broadcast studio in the middle of the thing.
Really?
And we used to haul that around on a trailer. And my first remote was to haul that over to Evansville, to Green River Road, to the miniature golf place there. And I had to get it over there. And
by yourself?
Yes, I was by myself. And I had to haul that over to this place. And I'd never pulled that boombox before, and I was white-knuckling it. As a matter of fact, we used to have, on my way back, we had bag phones in the van. Remember bag phones?
I do.
Or cell phones? And I had my mother made me promise her to call her on my way back from Evansville. So when I got out of Evansville and I was heading back to Owensboro and I was free and clear, and I was pulling the boombox, I called her and told her, I said, I'm on my way back. And she said, because I was pulling that box, and I never.
She was worried about you.
Yeah, she was worried about me.
That was sweet.
Yeah.
So, Brent, with your personality, you seem very outgoing, extroverted. Is that the way you are?
No, I'm very introverted. And no, I'm not extroverted at all.
So how do you do it? I mean, how do you like your first remote? Obviously, you've got to get out there in front of people. And what do you do?
Well, I listen to some of the greatest people on radio go do remotes, and I learn from them. Everything I've ever done on radio, I stole from somebody. And I just listened to what they did, the dudes that knew what they were doing. And I went, stole a little bit here, stole a little bit there, created a character, because that's all it is. It's a character.
It's like acting,
right? It's like acting. And I got there, and I turned it on, and I did it, and it was fine. I finished, came back, and that's the way it is. When you're on radio, the first thing, and I've told you this many times, it's a big smile on your face, have a happy thought, and start talking.
That's good.
That's absolutely the way it goes, and it works, too.
That's great advice. Yeah. Well, people would never, ever know that you're introverted at all, especially even if they meet you, because you can talk and talk. I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge. I could ask you about literally anything, and we'll get into that a little bit. I think you've read every book that I've ever thought of before, and you're more than a radio personality or a production director or whatever. You're a lot more than that. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
Right? So when we come back, we'll hear from Brent. Everyone stay tuned. Welcome back to Shaped by Faith, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. Well, we have got Brent Gardner in the house. And Brent, they actually called you Dan Van Man.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, in the late 90s. I was on the WBKR's morning show for about 2 years with Sky Phillips, and I was Dan the Van Man.
Why were you Dan the Van Man?
Well, I was actually the second Dan the Van Man. The first one was this other guy, and I forget his name, but he kind of quit and went to California to be a comedian.
Oh,
so
did he make it?
I don't know. I don't remember his real name. But anyway, I was on the air on our other station back in the 90s, the Top 40 station, and they were getting ready to automate the overnights, because overnights kind of don't exist anymore. I mean, it's all gone away. But that's how a lot of people got started in business, working overnights on radio stations. You'd come in and work an overnight shift, or did like I do, you program something and run a board, and then do a little bit of shift here and there, but overnights have kind of disappeared. But anyway, they were getting rid of that overnight shift, and Sky Phillips came walking through one morning at 6 o'clock, because he was the morning guy on BKR, and he was doing it by himself. And he came through, and he said, "How you doing this morning?" And I said, "I'm doing all right." I said, "I probably won't be here much longer. I think they're going to get rid of my shift." And he said, "Well, we'll see about that." So the next morning he comes in, and he told me that on Monday, I was Dan the Van Man on WBKR. I said, all right. So he and I had the morning show for 2 years on WBKR. I was Dan the Van Man, and it was a blast. I did all kinds of stuff. I had an Army dog chase me across Kentucky Wesleyan College lawn. I had all the gear on. Yeah, we had an Army recruiter here in Owensboro, and he always would come in the show with us. And he said one morning, he said, "Hey, Dan, you want to be attacked by a dog?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, because he had his attack dog that he had in the Army, and he had the suit and everything, and he brought it in. We went across the street, and he turned that dog loose on me, and I was all suited up, everything.
I hope
and
you
it was live on the radio, and I went running across the lawn, and the dog attacked me. It was fantastic.
You had the mic on the whole
it was on the cell phone. It was on the cell phone, yeah. I had the cell phone, and I was running across. It was fun. I did all kinds of stuff and had a great time doing it.
You had a little mascot, too, didn't you? Or a bear or something like that? We had a bear
at that time, yeah. We had the Beaker Bear.
Okay,
yeah.
Beaker
Bear.
Okay,
yeah.
Beaker Bear. Okay. So for 2 years, what you guys talked about anything and everything,
We
right?
did everything. It was just, the two of us, we would never talk to each other when I'd get here in the morning. We would say good morning, drink our coffee, and read the paper. And then the second he popped the microphone on, then we started. It was just a conversation. Mm-hmm. And he would come up with something, and I would come up with something. And we did a steak eating contest one time, and I don't even know how we started it. He came up with this. We started talking, and we started talking about steak, and I said something about, "I bet I could eat more than you." And next thing I know, we were in a steak eating contest. It was great.
Wild and crazy days.
It was crazy. We had everybody at the restaurant, too. Everybody. We had the van parked out front, and it was fantastic. It just because he challenged me, and I won.
Did you really?
Yes, I won the steak eating contest by a few ounces, and the loser had to dress up and broadcast from the old Executive Inn. We had a studio down there. Remember WBKR?
I do remember.
Had
yes.
the studio. Had to go down there dressed as a woman and do the show. And he did, and he was beautiful.
Wow, times have changed a lot, though, haven't they?
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Let's talk about you being a production director and what it was like when you first started that compared to what it's like now.
Well, today it's all online. It's all computer. Back in the old days, it was different. It was pen and paper. That's the way it was done. They had machines that they used, but it was mostly pen and paper. That's how you did it. Now it's all on the internet. My main job is when you hear a commercial in the air, I've put it in. I've scheduled that spot. That's what I do. And I write scripts for clients.
You edit shows.
I do help you with your show.
A lot.
And we have syndicated programming, and I load that up. So pretty much that's what I do as a production director. I have clients come in and record.
Okay.
So that's what a production director does. But it's mainly making sure that the commercials run. And when we have storms around, I come in and make sure that the commercials run during the storms.
But there's still a lot of work that you do.
Oh, absolutely.
That you put into it.
Yes, absolutely.
I think you've told me before back in the day you actually spent the night in the studio.
Oh, yeah, many times during snowstorms when we couldn't get out. I would sleep on the floor in the building, yes.
In the reel-to-reel, just so people get an image and a picture of that, like you had to, did you slice it? Did you cut it?
Yeah, to edit tape, we had a block, an editing block, and you'd used to have to pull the tape down from the reel. Forever, you'd find the first part of it, and you'd cue it up and you'd mark it with a China marker. Then you would pull it down out of the machine into the block, and you have a razor blade, and it's at an angle. When you'd cut tape back in the day, it was at an angle, so that it would, instead of being an abrupt straight edge, it would be an angle, and it would flow into that splice. So you'd have to cut it, then you'd have to go to the other end that you wanted and find it, mark it, and pull it down, cut that off, and then you'd slide the two together, and you would tape them. And that's it. That's how you
sounds hard.
Oh,
and like you
it's
could
an
mess
art.
up.
It's an art. Oh, I would leave.
What if you messed up?
Well, then that was it. You can't fix it. It's not like today. We have digital editing systems which you can go back and fix it and undo what you've done once you cut the tape.
That's it?
It's over.
Wow.
And I would do 6-hour air shifts and cut tape, and it never failed. I would leave every morning, and I'd have fingers cut because I'm doing it so fast and cutting it.
Unbelievable.
And we call those when you see a reel-to-reel and you see all the tape, those are called pancakes. And you would have, so you would go, after you edit a reel so much or edit a pancake so much, it loses its quality.
Okay.
You know, and it sounds terrible because it has so many edits in it. So then you have to go ask the PD, program director, for a new pancake. And that's what that was. You'd want, hey, I need a new pancake. And then he'd bring in a new pancake.
That's interesting. Well, you see those on old movies where they're holding the older reels and they're just a round circular thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, who has influenced you the most with your career? I know you've mentioned a lot of different names.
Oh, well, the real Don Steele, he wasn't a deep, on KHJ in California, he wasn't a deep voice guy. He had like a medium range, and that's what I am. I'm not deep. I'm a medium range kind of guy, and I always enjoyed him. Robert W. Morgan, he had a kind of a deep voice. Those guys inspired me when I was a kid, but mostly the people that inspired me have been the ones I've worked with, as I mentioned before. My whole personality is stolen from everybody. I mean, everybody I've ever worked, Big Bill Love, he gave me so much advice when I was a kid and first started in this business. So many people that, I mean, all the top people I worked with on that top 40 station, Brian Jackson, Tim Michelson, Kevin Osborne, Mike Desmond, Barry Witherspoon, all these people that I worked with then. Fantastic.
And they were more than willing to help you out.
Absolutely. That's what it was all about. And then here at BKR, even today, we got Chad. He's fantastic. Dave Spencer's fantastic. Barb Berge. Dave Spencer, Barb Berge, and I together, all of us combined, over 100 years experience.
Wow.
Yeah, doing this. Been doing it a long time. But I've been inspired by so many people, mostly the people I've worked with, because they've all been talented people.
Do you have any hobbies?
I used to do art, but I don't do it too much anymore.
Well, you did my sign for Shaped by Faith.
Shaped by Faith sign.
I think you're good at drawing, and he's also the voiceover on all my TV shows.
Yes, I'm international.
You are over 200 countries.
200 countries.
And you're on 5 days a week on all different channels. Did you know that, Brent?
I didn't know it was 5 days a week.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It is. But I love your voice, and you're always so kind to me, and you help me out with this show a lot. So is there something about you that the public doesn't know that you want to share?
To be honest with you, most of the people don't even know who I am. I'm the most anonymous DJ in the history of Owensboro Radio.
You are.
Yeah, I know, but most people don't. Most people know me as Dan the Van Man.
Would you want to pick that back up again?
Oh, Dan the Van Man? Yeah, it'd be fun.
Well, maybe you should.
I don't know. It's not my decision.
So what keeps you in radio? What do you love about radio?
Well, I loved it coming in. I love my production job, but when I was on the air all the time, and I would come in, I had an air shift, and I would come in, and every time I would pull into the parking lot, I would sit in the car and I would look up at the antennas, and I'd go, and to myself, I'd think, I get to walk in this building and get on a radio and play music all night and talk to people on the phone and have fun, and they give me money. That is amazing.
So this was you're so passionate about what you do. It's not just a job for you.
No, it's the love of my life. I absolutely love it. I always have, always will. So
as far as breaking into the radio business now, how is it different now than what it used to be?
Well, today it's a lot different because it's mostly automated and aren't any overnight shifts really. That's where everybody gets started when you're a kid. You come in in overnight shifts. It's just a different business than it was. It's hard to get in it.
Okay, we're going to go into the third segment. I'm excited about the story you're about to share.
Okay, it's the greatest radio story ever.
Okay, so everyone stay tuned for more Shaped by Faith coming up next. Welcome back to Shaped by Faith. We shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. Okay, we're all waiting, Brent, for this great story you have to share.
Okay, this is the greatest radio story, and I always tell, as we were talking before about artists today, they still go around and they'll come in trying to push their music, And we have them in here quite a bit. And when they get finished on the air, if it's with Chad or if it's with Barb or if it's with Dave Spencer, when they get finished being on the radio, I grab them and I drag them to my office and I tell them the story because it's such an inspirational story. Okay, we used to have a lady here, wonderful, wonderful woman. Her name was Edith Bennett. And when she started off in radio, she was a receptionist in the early 50s here at the radio station. And back then, that's when a lot of the early artists would really, you take Loretta Lynn or any of them, they would hit the road pushing their music. They'd go to radio stations because you had to get your record on radio to be heard.
Right.
So one day, and this is, mid-50s, 53, probably 54 or so, and she was real young herself, this kid comes in, and he walks in, and at that time, I think you're going to post on the website, there'll be a picture of the old radio station that I started working in. At that time, the general manager, his name was Hugh Potter, and he lived above the radio station. It was an apartment. And this kid comes in, and he wants the radio station to play his music. Well, Miss Bennett's sitting there, and she said, well, let me get Mr. Potter down here. We'll take a listen. So Mr. Potter comes down, and they take this kid back to this production room where there's a turntable, and they put his record on there, and they play the record. And it finishes up, and he reaches down and he picks it up. He signs the record. He kisses Miss Bennett on the cheek, and he says, I thank you all for playing my record. And he walks out the door. And Mr. Potter turns to Edith Bennett and says, well, he's a great kid, great looking. He kind of sounds good, but he'll never make it. It was Elvis Presley.
Oh, wow.
And so all the years, Miss Bennett told me that on the first Sunday, because I used to run all the Sunday morning stuff for her. And I had another woman named Jane Hamilton Bowling. She's no longer with us. Fantastic people. Jane taught me so many things, too. But I used to run all the Sunday morning stuff for Miss Bennett. And on my first morning to ever work with Miss Bennett, she told me that story.
Fantastic.
And I'm thinking, really? Elvis Presley had been in this building. And when I would come to work after that and I would touch the door on that old building, it was the door that Elvis touched. I'm thinking, that's the door Elvis touched. So I would come into work, and she told me that story. And I never had anybody confirm that for me. I'd always heard the story. She told me, Then a few years ago, we had a woman come up, and she had worked at the radio at WOMI in the mid-'70s. And she came in one day. She left radio, and she joined the United States Marine Corps, became a lieutenant colonel, traveled the whole world. Well, she and her husband retired to Hopkinsville.
Okay.
And they had come up for the barbecue festival, and they were looking for the old radio station, of course, long gone. And they looked over and saw this building, and they came in and they came to the receptionist and they said, we're looking for the oldest person in the building. Well, that's me. So she came back and we talked. I don't know how long we talked. I don't remember her name. We got into so much stuff. And I asked her, I said, do you remember the Elvis story? And she said, Brent, I remember that story. And she said, when I worked there at the radio station, that record was framed and hanging in the lobby.
Wow.
And I don't know where it is. Miss Bennett died in 2013. Her estate might have it. I don't know who has it. But it was Elvis Presley. And everybody said that about him. He was never going to make it. Mm-hmm. The guy's still making money, and he's been dead almost 43 years, and an amazing artist. But that's the way it is. And we still have folks come in today, like I said, and I inspire them with that.
That is the greatest radio story I've ever heard.
I've told people that story, and some of them get weak in the knees when I get to them, and I tell them it was Elvis Presley.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Brent, we're out of time.
Oh, no!
I know. Thanks so much for being my guest.
You're welcome, Theresa. You finally had your dream come true.
I know. Woo! And thank you for listening, everyone. Have a blessed day. Bye.